This is Global Order. I'm Hindol Sengupta. I'm absolutely delighted that Bharat Karnad has joined me today. Now, how does one really introduce Bharat Karnad? When I was in college and starting out as a journalist, it used to be said in Delhi that there is only one hawk at the Center for Policy Research, and that is Bharat Karnad. So we all lined up to go and listen to him read whatever he wrote. Recently, when I was doing an interview with a general as part of Global Order, I asked him what he thought about Bharat Karnad's idea about what India should do about its nuclear weapons. And he said, well, we all disagree with Bharat whenever he says anything. And 10 years later, Bharat Karnad is proved to be right. Now, that in a nutshell, I think, explains the story of Bharat Karnad. Professor Karnad, welcome.
Thank you very much. Look forward to the interaction.
I want to begin by talking about one piece that you have recently written about Operation Sindoor. That piece really caught my eye, and I read it many times. In that, you explain why India made one strategic blunder during Operation Sindoor, and which is not taking over once again the Haji Pir Pass. You explain there that India, of course, used to have the Haji Pir Pass. It gave it back, as it were, in 1965. And this was, the last sentence of your piece is particularly interesting. You say that this entire opportunity of getting the Haji Pir Pass in the POK region back from Pakistan will perhaps never come again. So this is a mistake India will live to really regret. Talk to me a little bit about that.
Yeah, look, by the early light of May 10th, when we had struck most of the air bases and we had taken out the Pakistani command control and communications hub at the Noor Khan base in Chaklala, which incidentally happens to be the headquarters of the Pakistan Strategic Plans Division, which is the Nuclear Secretariat. It's housed there. So you had taken out the communication C3 hub. Now, once you take out the C3 hub, what that means is that all the Pakistani Air Force bases and the squadrons and so on have no central authority telling them what to do. There's no communications. You're in war. The communications have been cut. They've been destroyed by the adversary. Now we have air dominance. This is an air dominance situation that you had, which meant that had you chosen, as I had advised, to pivot to a land offensive to take Haji Pir, for instance. I also said Skardu in the north. You could do it either simultaneously or, in a singular fashion. You would have had, the Pakistanis would have found it very difficult to muster their aerial assets to defend, or to prevent an Indian land force from going in to take Haji Pir. Why Haji Pir? Again, I mean, the salient is basically a piece of land sticking into Indian territory. And on all three sides, it is surrounded by India. So all you need to do is from the north here is Uri, in the south here is Poonch. Here at the head is Mandi. So basically we have forces on all three sides. So all you need to do is, cut off at this Uri-Poonch line, north-south line. You cut off the salient, and then you rationalize the LOC. Why is that important? Because the Haji Pir salient is from where the ISI infiltrates the terrorists into Srinagar Valley. So that's important for that reason. And basically, once that Haji Pir comes into Indian possession, the long round route that we have around Haji Pir from Uri to Poonch would be cut from some 286 kilometers to 52 kilometers, something like that. So right away you see what how our operational logistics eases. All kinds of benefits then accrue to the Indian military. And that's the reason why I said Haji Pir, which, as you pointed out, and I've been mentioning, that it was taken in 65. We had to return it because, we lost Charm in 65. And so they gave back Charm in return for Haji Pir, which we had taken. and one para under Ranjit Singh Dayal had taken it, Major Ranjit Singh Dayal, later Lieutenant General Ranjit Singh Dayal. Um, and so, this is a situation where you got back in because the Pakistanis had, according to them, suspended the Shimla Accord, which had talked about this line, LOC, as a semi-formal, informal boundary. If they had suspended it, that legitimated our going in, because under international law, a ceasefire line can be, taken advantage of by either party to the dispute by using military means. So you could use it internationally. You had sanction to do it. All you needed to do was to apply the necessary force, which we had at Mandi, Uri, and Punch, as I just pointed out. And so you had, and they have, of course, formations inside. But when you have this kind of situation where you can cut them off on the north-south line with special forces, you prevent their resupply, then what happens? It becomes like a Kargil situation. They can't back down, they can't go out, they're going to be destroyed in detail, or they surrender. See the point? There's only so much fighting they can do once you're cut off from your supply lines. Why didn't anybody think about it on the run? I mean, that's what I said. I don't know whether you read my last report, where I said, and there you will find some details about many of these things, where I said, we see both the military and the government seem to not be able to walk and chew gum at the same time, meaning we are simply not nimble enough to have taken advantage of the Pakistani discomfiture. They had no air, they had no nothing. We'd have gone in without worrying about the Pakistani Air Force coming in, because their Air Force is very professional, mind you. Let's be very clear. They're tactically far more innovative. I've always said, just look at the first post I wrote pre-Sindoor, April 30th. What did I say? The quality of Pakistani pilots has always been far superior to Indian pilots, honestly. I've always been honest and straightforward, and this is what it is, whether anybody likes it or not. And they proved it.
That's true. Why is that true?
Because they have always been very good. They get the creme de la creme from the society, comes into the fighter pilot cadre, and they are the tops, honestly. After Israelis, I think they are the best fighting force in aerially speaking, in terms of maneuvers, in terms of tactical innovations, and so on. So the fact is, this is what they couldn't have relied on had we gone in, because we had destroyed the C3 hub on, at first light, May 10th. Actually, our attack went in at around midnight, May 10th. And as I don't think you have read the last post I've written, wherein I said that they were preparing to send in their attack plan, and it was going to be initiated at 0100 May 10th. We went in at 1200 hours, May 9th, May 10th. So we had the advantage of an hour in that hour we destroyed everything. So we had the advantage, is what I'm saying. So it could have been done. And
you say that this opportunity will probably never come again. Why do you say that?
Because now, you see, the problem was they had no redundant communications. Now they'll set up redundant communication systems and networks. They suddenly realized, my God, we had lost our Air Force by simply not being able to communicate with our bases and with the squadrons from the central authority managing the air warfare from Nur Khan. Now, once that was lost, that's not going to happen again, because now they're going to build up redundancies, and the Chinese are going to help them build up the redundancies.
When you talk about the other part of this conversation, I want to talk about something that you've written many, many times in different platforms, about how India's deterrence, nuclear deterrence, is just not good enough. And you have advocated that India must continue to test, number one. Number two, it must build a Megaton Bomb. Now, once again, many people disagree with you, but slowly the tide seems to be turning over the last few years. And I think today many people are perhaps coming around to your belief. Explain to me why you say this.
Well, look, Pakistan is really not a nuclear or strategic foe. China is, right? Pakistan is, I've called it a nuisance, not a threat. And when you don't distinguish nuisance, military nuisance from a military threat, we have a problem. We seem unable to have done, do that. After 71, when you bifurcated that country, even whatever residual threat in notional terms was gone. And yet, after 71, most of your forces concentrated, all your three services concentrated on Pakistan. How does that make sense? As a professional, as a military professional, I've asked all kinds of chiefs, and then none of them can answer it, obviously, because it's so idiotic, so senseless. That's when you should have pivoted to China and built up capacities and capabilities to deal with China. We did none of that. We concentrated all our monies and efforts on dealing with Pakistan. So we have three strike corps, way in excess of need. Tank fleets deal with Pakistan. I mean, it's like taking an elephant gun to shoot a gnat. Now you can shoot a gnat. The gnat would, of course, be destroyed. But then you can also take off your toe and your foot when you fire an elephant gun at a gnat sitting on your kneecap or on your leg. What's going to happen? You're going to end up destroying yourself. It's what we have done. We have built up our capabilities to deal very well with Pakistan. But now we find that we can't deal with China, right? Why? That was the reason why we scrambled so hard after Galwan in 2020, when we had more forces. Had the Chinese pushed through, and that's why we rushed. We pretty much denuded our two strike corps, as I've been saying they should do. For 10, 15 years now, I've been saying, have one composite corps for any Pakistan contingency. That's all you need, one composite strike corps, which is armored elements, right? Built around an armored division with several independent armored brigades. That's more than enough for Pakistan contingency. I said, move these armored divisions that are at the heart of the strike corps, two strike corps. We have strike corps, one strike corps, two strike corps, and 21 strike corps. These are the three strike corps. What we have done is we've retained two corps as the composite corps that I've always thought we should have, and then taken out the armored divisions from the 1 and the 21 armored, strike corps to lay 14 corps. See what you've done. Now, how do you don't have a mountain fighting offensive strike corps for the mountains with T-72 main battle tanks. I mean, that should be reasonably understood by anybody, because the MBTs that are T-70 are for plains and desert warfare. These are things, huge, big machines at 50, 60 tons that are rolling on. You can't climb mountains and jump up and down all over the place with these kinds of things. And the Indian Armored Element Armored Directorate never prioritized a light tank until about 3 or 4 years ago, when the Zorawar was thought of. Now I've been shouting and screaming for years, have a goddamn light tank, which is the light tank that went through Zojila in the 1947-48 ops. With old Stuart light tanks, led by Rajinder Singh Sparrow, Lieutenant General Rajinder Singh Sparrow, if you recall. He led those tanks over Zojila at the advent of winter in 47-48 ops with very light tanks. You can't take MBTs over mountain passes to reach Leh. So, I don't know what.
And therefore nuclear.
Nuclear is, well, look, the nuclear thing is, if Pakistan is not the adversary, so Pakistan is not an adversary for nuclear weapons, please, right? As I said, that is like taking an elephant gun to a gnat. why do I, why have I said and campaigned and advocated since my days in the NSAB when we drafted the doctrine that China should be the sole and exclusive threat we should deal with in nuclear realm? Because they're the ones, they're the adversary that matter. The only adversary that matters, simply because the gap that they have widened in the strategic realm with India is precisely in the thermonuclear realm. Their standard issue warhead on the Dongfang 3s and 4s are 3.3 megaton. One single warhead. That's why I've said the only warhead that we have that is proven and tested is a 20 kiloton. I've called it a firecracker compared to the 3.3 megaton. A megaton is 3.3 million tons of TNT equivalent, not 20,000 tons of TNT equivalent. I mean, the war is lost at that instance because psychologically, can you imagine a 3.3 incoming against you setting up, oh, we have 20 kiloton, we have 20 kiloton. Oh, yeah. What's going to happen when psychologically they open up the 3.3 incoming? What happens to, we lose our brains and our minds in simple crises. We are so nervous, right? What happens when the Chinese say, okay, we are now coming in. You guys we have had enough with you. We are coming in with and they just open up. They don't have to do a thing. Our satellites pick up the fact that they've trundled out the Dongfang 3s and 4s from the firing bases in wherever it is, on the Tibetan plateau, outside there in Yunnan and elsewhere. What will happen? Our satellites will pick up the fact that they have opened up their, they're readying their Dongfang 3s and 4s with 3.3 megaton, right? Weapons, warheads. Someone comes into the Prime Minister's office, sir, they opened up, this is a crisis, there's a fighting going on in the Himalayas. They are losing, let's use that as a scenario, wherein the Chinese say, oh shit, we have to get and do something. We can't lose face to these Indians. What did Mao say? Why he had started the 62 war? He said the Nehru was getting cocky. His words, cocky, right? So it doesn't take much for the Chinese to unsettle them or pivot them towards something where they have a definite edge, military edge. And the definite military edge is in the thermonuclear field. So once they open up, what do you think is going to happen to an Indian Prime Minister who says, अच्छा भाई इसका मतलब क्या है? 3.3 megaton क्या चीज है? Huh? So someone has to explain to him what a 3.3 megaton on Delhi is. Your Smersh S-400s are not going to prevent it, right? There's going to be an altitude burst at 2,000 feet where there's for maximum effect. You're going to have, what can I tell you? 1 megaton at, say roughly, and I'm saying very roughly, if it from ground zero, say the ground zero is Connaught Place, or what's it called these days, Rajiv Gandhi Place or whatever it is, and 40 miles away, if someone's holding a paper, it'll begin burning. That's the thermonuclear. There are three types of effects. First is the kinetic effect, the sheer blast wave that's going to come and destroy everything, all the buildings, everything. Then comes the thermal wave, the heat wave, that's going to burn everything. Then third comes the radioactive spread, which then kills you in slow stages as it goes along. So, this is at 1 megaton. Now, consider what's going to happen at 3.3 megaton. We say, oh, yeah, we are going to be no first use. And I said that when we're drafting. Do you guys even know what it means? None of them knows deterrence literature. Nobody in the NSAB knew. The three services chiefs, they're just looking at Bob, kya bol raha hai? Kisi ko kuch pata nahi hai. Why? Because nuclear has not been part of our vocabulary or our thinking. It is because That was my field at UCLA. And you had, strategic dadas and pioneers like Bernard Brodie that, I was, who were teaching us, holding seminar classes with us. And I had wanted him on my dissertation committee. It didn't work out simply because, my anyway, the reasons it didn't work out with Bernard Brodie is a separate thing. But the point is that you have a real problem in India because our system is not geared to thinking in strategic nuclear ways, right? Because we are so used to conventional thing, and that too with the Pakistani mara-mari with them. It's basically mara-mari because, what did the great scholar soldier of the Indian Army, perhaps the finest scholar soldier the Indian Army has produced, D.K. Monty Pilot, Major General Monty Pilot, say? How did he describe India-Pakistan conflicts? He called them communal riots with tanks, which is exactly correct. Because when I talked to the general and said, General, were you being facile in calling these wars, so-called wars, communal riots with tanks? He pulled himself to, full height of some 6 feet odd and said, Bharat, I'm never facile. I said, in that case, General, I said, I'll take your riot description as a communal riot as an analytic template and analyze India-Pakistan wars. And sure enough, he was right. All the India-Pakistan wars fit riot metrics. That's why no one takes India-Pakistan war seriously. I don't. If anybody else does, well, they're welcome to it. And this proved it. Three days of absurdity, you call a war? This is a war? 3 days, and then everybody just throws up their hands. Okay, we're good. We both win, and everybody has chocolates and everybody's happy. I mean, be serious.
Let me ask you then, essentially then, the solution, according to you, is that we need to develop a megaton bomb.
Absolutely, we have to have open-ended testing because the S1 device we tested on May 11, 1998 was a dud. It was a fizzle. By the way, fizzle, dud is a literary allusion. Fizzle is not. It's a technical term. What is a fizzle? Fizzle is when the yield is between 7 and 20% of the planned yield. That's a fizzle. Anything above that is success. And by the way, no big deal. The first time you test a thermonuclear device is bound to be a dud. Why? 30% of all thermonuclear tests conducted by all the countries in the world are duds. Didn't work out. Why? Because the engineering and the design is very complicated. The stage device you have, the first stage, the second stage, the radiation channel. I don't want to get into what may have gone wrong, but in my book, if you read Nuclear Weapons in Indian Security, you have Dr. Iyengar, who initiated the thermonuclear project in the first place, saying that it was a partial thermonuclear burn. What does that mean? It means, and his metaphor was, he said, think of the partial thermonuclear burn as a wet wood that you have set afire. It will not burn. There'll be a lot of smoke. There might be some parts of it that are dry enough to catch fire. So they'll be there. That's what happened. It is correctable had we said, okay, and this was immediately intimated to the government at the time by the Director of Field Testing, Dr. K. Santhanam. And he wrote formally to the government saying we need to test again because this didn't work out, that we have to rejig the design we have. So I don't want to get into any details about what may have gone wrong. These are technical stuff and whatever. But the point is we needed renewed testing, which we gave up thanks to Jaishankar as the lead negotiator for the 2008 nuclear civilian cooperation agreement with the United States. They gave it up. Why does America so want us not to have thermonuclear weapons? Did anybody think strategically? Did Jaishankar think? No, because his father was my colleague and we had arguments all the time. He said, no, Bharat, 20 kiloton is enough. Arey, Baba, yes, it's enough for normal people, for normal adversaries. But what if the adversary has, almost 170 to 100 odd thermonuclear weapons, of the megaton range? I mean, and many more of the 500, 400 kiloton range. We have nothing.
I want to ask you, sir. So it seems unlikely that we will test again. And what does this do for us? I mean, this seems to be a major, I mean, all this thing that we talk about in terms of our deterrence, you're essentially saying that deterrence doesn't exist as far as China is concerned.
No, that's the reason why in my last book, Staggering Forward, I've suggested that we should have a first use policy against China. Now we have to go risk first use. Why am I saying that? Otherwise, it'll have a free run on the LAC, line of actual control, the disputed border, which is some 4,700 kilometers long from here to there, from Aksai Chin all the way into Arunachal Pradesh, 4,700 kilometers. They can ingress anytime, anywhere, they can do anything. That's what they've been doing. They're getting back to what they've always said was their idea of the LOC, their idea, claim line, having most of Tawang district, saying, yeah, you give us Tawang and everybody is happy and we can go back to picnicking and, Hindi chini bhai bhai, this shit. So this is the problem. We have who is doing the strategic thinking in all this? The China, what is this called? The China Studies Circle or something. I mean, I know the people who have been there. I mean, the less said about them, the better. I'm sorry to say. The less said about them, the better. Because if these are the people who are running the show on the China front, well, I'm going to move to some other country. Because, I have no confidence at all. Because when they're in the position of foreign secretary and this, that, and the other, and they're in the China Studies Circle advising the government to do this and that, they have one idea. When they retire, they come out and they have completely different views. They suddenly become more enlightened. Oh, China is a very dangerous place. What were you doing when you were there? What were you doing when you were there? And I don't want to name foreign secretaries and that a whole lot of shebang lot of people who have, this kind of, they know nothing. They don't know anything about military things. I don't think they understand PLA or any of the China. They don't understand military stuff, honestly. How many foreign service people understand military? Nobody. How many people understand nuclear? One person that I know of. And he understands wrong things. So he may understand the physics of it, but the rest of it, and who is that person? He's a good friend, so I'll mention him. Ambassador Rakesh Sood, who was our, he understands the physics at least, which is one up on most of his compatriots and colleagues who don't understand anything, So then what can I say? I mean, it's fun. I mean, I've taken it to a point where, I joke about this in this fashion because I simply cannot take the Indian government seriously with the way they do things on nuclear matters. They don't test, they say we have a thermonuclear weapon. How do you have a thermonuclear weapon? Because R. Chidambaram said so. Who is R. Chidambaram? R. Chidambaram is amongst those guys who, okay, you have to go back again into history. I'm sorry, but this is the way how things work. Here is Santanam saying it did not work. Here is Iyengar, P.K. Iyengar, and I don't know whether you've seen the book of that has a collation of our articles at the time against the nuclear deal. All of us were beating our head against the stone wall, as it were. And who are the people? P.K. Iyengar, Dr. A.N. Prasad. Who was Dr. A.N. Prasad? The radiochemist who started the reprocessing, uranium reprocessing, which really put India on the map. When were we weapons capable? March of 1964. 6 months before the Chinese tested on October 16th, 1964, we had the And had we gone full ahead, as Baba was saying, as so many people at the time were saying, we should have gone full square thermonuclear test, even if it was a dud test, establish a testing regime. Second time go in. What did the Chinese do? They don't have any of this nonsense of prevarication and peace-mindedness and all this peace-mongering crap that assails our people, because the second test was a thermonuclear. Do you know that? 64 first test, implosion device. Second test, 67, thermonuclear. Ta-da! End of the story for the deterrence. America said, that's it. Now we have to live with the Chinese. Do you know that? Who said that? Robert McNamara at a convocation address at the University of Michigan, July of 1967. That's it. He said, that's it. Meaning we can't bully the Chinese anymore. End of the story. Robert McNamara, Secretary of Defense, right? See how the Chinese do it? What's the things they prioritized? In 1956, they prioritized nuclear submarines. When the Russians said, oh, we'll give you our nuclear submarines, Mao said, yes, fine, but who will have the finger on the trigger? You have to have the will, the strategic sense, and the strategic resolve, which none of these things is what we have. We are into, what is this, Vishwa Guru and all this stuff. And, we are into.
I want to ask you, Professor Karnad, two questions. I mean, the key takeaways from what you're saying, number one, our much vaunted, flaunted nuclear deterrence, in effect, is really questionable compared to China. That's number one. Number two, in order to resolve that, we should either test more, move towards a thermonuclear weapon, or we should immediately go into a first use case with China. Would that be the key takeaways? Am I correct?
Yes, but I am for going first use any case against China on the border. Why? Because they have an advantage always, because they are always the first movers in all of these. We always react. We are the passive, reactive, defensive type, right? That is hardwired into our psyche, into our policy, into our strategizing, hardwired. Our reflex is that, किसी ने मार दिया थप्पड़, उसके बाद we'll react. Someone has blown off your legs, उसके बाद we'll react. Arif, when we were writing the doctrine, I said, does the Prime Minister know when on May 28th he made the suo motu statement before the NSAB, the first NSAB was even established? He already had announced that we'll be no first use, we'll have a minimum deterrence. They already announced that. I said, why do they need us to articulate a doctrine? The Prime Minister has already done so. The Subramaniam, who was in the chair, who was our nuclear doctrine drafting group, there were 27 people, nobody knew anything. There were 2 or 3 of us who had understood deterrence literature, including Subramaniam, which he did. And I respect Subramaniam because he knew his literature. Because there's been no nuclear war or exchange, it's theory. Everything is heuristic, right? But you have to have informed speculation of what may happen. Informed, not opinionated. Everybody has opinions about everything in India, in Delhi. Everybody is a nuclear expert. Everybody is a, defense expert. Everybody is everything. So in this kind of a milieu, what's the problem? We are all experts. So your view is as good as mine. As good as Tangawala's out there, you can go out on the street. What's your thing? Atamba ma maar do. Theek hai. Very good. That kind of stuff. So what's the difference? When you don't respect knowledge, you don't respect expertise, you don't bother to create expertise in the institutions, lead institutions.
I want to ask you, Professor, and this is often now spoken of even culturally at a sense that we have, it is in a sense fashionable these days to say that India doesn't have Shatru both, so to speak, that word in Hindi, that the sense of who your adversary is. A lot of what you're talking about talks about something that many of us have felt. There is a deep lack of genuine strategic understanding, not only among the government, but also, in a sense, among the Indian public sphere, so to speak. We talk about conflict in this extremely pacifist sort of way. We don't take strategic, adversaries seriously. We don't take, challenges, security challenges seriously at every level. I mean, you're talking about, conflict and war and the nuclear realm, but our borders are exactly the same. Everybody talks about our borders as if they're porous borders. Why do you think, you've studied this for a lifetime, why do you think we lack this strategic understanding about our own sovereignty?
Well, I think, I don't know whether you read my nuclear weapons in Indian security, because that lays out all the whole thing. Why? It's not because we lack a strategic culture, my God. When we talk about Brahmastra so easily, there was a doctrine behind Brahmastra in the Vedas. I thought I'd learned my deterrence from Bernard Brodie and Albert Wohlstetter and all these dadas in Rand and so on. I discovered that the Vedas had it in the articulation of the doctrine, where they essentially say Brahmastra is not to be used for minor wars. It's not for just doing this and that. It is as an ultimate resort. When everything is at stake, when the universe is at stake, you use the Brahmastra. I mean, how much better articulation can be there about deterrence? Here we have turned it into a akhada politics. I mean, I remember after the May 1998 test. Do you remember the Chief Minister of Delhi, Khurana? He turned it into akhada. अच्छा अब अखाड़े में आ जाएंगे तो मार देंगे. अरे, which akhada are you talking about? With the Chinese? They stamp on you like an ant. You're talking about Pakistan. We measure everything against Pakistan. That's why I said that the great success of Pakistani foreign military policy is that they are thought of as equals by India. We think of them as equals. Who's to blame? Why should they then be denied the view that, we are your equal? Because we treat them as equals. Our entire force structure is aligned to the so-called Pakistani threat. This is the kind of stuff. So, I mean, our strategic culture, why you are asking me, is this happened. The greatest, I've pushed it down to, Hinduism, I call myself a Vedic Hindu. The point is, how do we trivialize our entire culture to this kind of almost, it's kind of a reduction of yourselves and the culture to trivial things like vegetarianism, Jainism, all that Jainism, Buddhism. Do you know what were the antecedents of Jainism and Buddhism? Because the Vedic culture was so rambunctious and vigorous and violent, I'm sorry to say, that all the Hindu kings and small rajas and they always fought at each other all the time. It was the Thomas, Lockean nightmare, right? Hobbesian nightmare of war of all against all the time. So people who are getting crunched were the people. They said, oh, heck with it, yeah. Let's get a kind of holiday from all this maramari and all this I'm killing, this, that, and the other. And then who comes along? You had some Jain Munis, you had the Buddha saying ahimsa, all the real world is Maya. That was nice, because if you're going to be, the king is fighting every time with some neighboring king. Someone else who funds the stuff, we fund the stuff. And then we get beaten in the bargain, right? Some other king comes in and stamps on us and beats us up. So they said, okay, we like this religion where everything is Maya. We don't have to worry about anything. Ahimsa is good. And then who comes along? 7th century. Look, I've written in that Nuclear Weapons in Indian Security. By the way, this is why, to me, it was a revelation, the Vedas and so on. A real revelation. This is so intrinsic to our culture, which we don't understand. Which is what? All this I've described to you, perfectly Vedic, by the way. This is all Vedas. Yeah, I'm not being provocative. You're just going to Rig Vedas, and because I can't read Sanskrit like my dad could in those days. School was in Sanskrit; they could read Sanskrit. I can't. So I've gone on commentaries on Vedas. So yes, I'm deficient in my understanding of the Vedas. What I know of the Vedas is from what I read English commentaries from. But the English commentaries are a revelation to me. Can you imagine what the original must have been if I could read the Vedas in the original? Anyway, whatever it was, by 7th century AD, you had Jainism, Buddhism coming in, then Jainism taking over, taking some of the Buddhist precepts, same thing, ahimsa and this, that, and the other. Then what happens to Hinduism? This is where Shankaracharya comes in, 7th century. He suddenly finds, yeah, Hinduism is eroding. You know, itna sab maramari ho raha hai, all this, people are sick and tired of all this sheer fatigue of war. Why? Because Vedas said so. You go and beat up on the next king. It was completely merciless. Wonderful. Vedas, in that sense, were absolutely no nonsense. The duty of the king was to expand his realm. Very simple. Vedas say so. I mean, no nice social governments, social welfare and health, none of those things. You mind your own damn thing. My brief is to expand the realm. When you have this kind of clarity, there is something to be said about our strategic culture. How come we have become so damn confused? We can't see, distinguish reality from fantasy. Even now, what does the RSS chief say today? What did he say yesterday? He said, what did he say about the thing I read somewhere? I mean, the lead thing.
I remember the organizer interview. I think he's given an interview to the organizer saying we have no choice but to be strong.
No. Forget about all that. I can get the papers right here. Just look up what the RSS Bhagwat has been quoted as saying. Again, very, iffy stuff, that nothing to do with the Veda type of stuff that I'm talking about. Anyway, Shankaracharya comes in. He says, yes, Hinduism is eroding. What are the things in Buddhism and Jainism that's attracting the people? And he discovered is this, peace and ahimsa and all this, maya stuff. So he says, okay, let's bring that into Hinduism. He makes that a Hindu tenet. It never was. It's not a Hindu tenet. Hindu is very basic. I mean, if you're powerful, go ahead, exercise your power. If you're not powerful, try to get the power that the powerful has. Very simple. Do you understand it? I can understand it. Everybody would understand that. How come nobody in the Indian government understands that? So the point is, those who have power will retain it. Those who have power are the P5, are the now P3, maybe it's P2, America and China. Right? Now, Europe is falling off. India is not in the picture. We are just hyperventilating about this, that, Vishwaguru and Vishwa. Now, I think Jaishankar latest was about in the Vishwa series of things. Vishwaguru, then something, we have come down to Vishwabandhu, right? We are a friend to everybody. Now, that has been given a kick in the backside with what's happened now, because we are saying this is not the age for war, right? And we are advising Putin it's not the age for war. We're telling Zelensky it's not the age for war. Then we are saying going to them after we are being hit by terrorism that we beat up on Pakistan. This is a joke, right? And I find it hilarious, honestly. I find it extremely hilarious. So what I mean is that someone has to take all this seriously. National security is not a joke. You cannot make it a joke because that's how the world sees us. Why is it the case that if we had such great influence, such great reach, not one country has came out in support? Because that's what we want, right? We want accolade. We want to be accoladed as the great Vishwaguru and peaceful fellows running around spreading good sense and this, that, and the other. What happened? Has any one country supported you? One country. Not one country has supported you. Then you're going begging around everywhere. Someone is going to Denmark. Arey Papa, what is Denmark? Denmark, you can have even Greater Kailash. There are fewer people than in all of Denmark. And we are going to people with a begging bowl as usual. as supplicants. Instead of doing what you have to do, you go to get recognition from everybody else, to do something. Does India expect to become a great power, these kinds of shenanigans? I'm sorry. I'm making it into a comedic kind of an opera, by saying these things. But someone has to be serious about these things. I can't anymore be. I cannot. I'm 77. I cannot anymore be serious about these things. And there's nobody else I see the academics, there's nobody in the commentariat, everybody into the, they're all doing this kind of shit. I completely give up. Because, and look at in Pakistan, at least there, people are in general, like the Indian populace here, are deluded. We think we are already a 47 trillion economy. Now we are going to displace America just around the corner. That's not very far in our estimation. So Pakistanis have no such thing. Please read their stuff. They're saying, God, ye to bach gaya. They are very realistic. They're thoughtful. The intelligentsia is realistic. Here our intelligentsia is not intelligent. I'm not sure how they become part of the intelligentsia. They might as well join the crowd. No, really, honestly. How are they intelligent if they don't have a realistic, shall we say, metrics to judge reality, to judge policy?
So I want to ask you, where does this leave us, Professor Karnad? I mean, where does this leave us in terms of, nuclear deterrence, which is becoming more and more important? We now talk about our second strike capability. How strong is it? While we're talking about all of this, the Arihan, the Arigat, and so on and so forth, there seems to be the picture that you're painting is about very large gaping holes, which in fact will not be easy to fill. And as you explain, there's no one who seems to be very interested in filling them either.
No, look, deterrence, the physical weapons systems, control systems, command control authority line, these are physical things. The procedures you have an Ariant, Arigat and all that, right? There are your missiles, your warheads, etc. That's a separate thing. Separate them. Whether or not anything works is a separate thing. Other than 20 kiloton, nothing works. You should assume nothing will work. Well, if you assume that, you claim that we have a 250 kiloton, and then you fire off, and it turns out to be what? It takes out a chicken camp or something, some poultry farm, let's say, right? The chicken get irradiated, they're fried up in nuclear fire. That's good. Then what happens? What kind of credibility will you have left? Because you have not tested anything. You haven't tested a 250. You haven't tested even a 50 kiloton. You haven't tested. When I say that to the army chiefs and all the military chiefs for the last 30 years, I've been saying, will you please write at least a demi-official letter to the Prime Minister saying, Arey Baba, every conventional weapon we get, we ragadav it. We test it in the desert. We test it under the sea. We test it in the air. We test it in Kerala. Everywhere we test it, right? And we blow up the things. Okay, that's great. And we say, okay, we accept it because it's good. Right. And the most decisive weapon you take on say so? Who say so? Who says so? R. Chidambaram? R. Chidambaram is a complete ass. That guy was a crystallographer. I've written it that in his time in crystallography, which is he is not a high pressure physicist. He understands crystallography, yes. He did the critical mass, yes. He calculated the critical mass for plutonium, yes. But so did a graduate student of Frank Dyson at Princeton University in 1972. A graduate student, he didn't have to go to Los Alamos. A graduate student calculated the critical mass in 1972 for Frank Dyson, who was part of the Manhattan Project. Now Frank Dyson is holding his head. Arey Baba, he has got the critical mass. They quickly gave him his PhD and said, bhag jao. You can't publish this. So what I'm saying is not high mathematics and some great, terrific, revolutionary stuff that R. Chidambaram did. And after that, he did nothing. I've had interactions with him innumerable times. He can't explain anything. our laser, I shouldn't say this, but I've said it in my writings, I'll say it here. Our laser centrifuge, laser enrichment facility in Indore is going to rack and ruin because they're not invested in it. I mean, what can I tell you? I mean, we are living on the edge. Just the other day when I was called in, as I said, for consultation, I said we are on the edge and we don't even recognize it. We talk nuclear to nuclear. Arey Baba, if you're satisfied with the 20 kilotons, say so. Why say you have a thermonuclear? Why say it? And then why are you testing everybody's, credibility? Your own. Someone has to say, okay, why does India have any credibility when they say no? Why? Because when 98 happened and they wanted to cap and freeze our weapons technology at the 10, 20 kiloton level, they said so openly. Who said so? Please go to my, everything is footnoted. All the congressional testimonies. The acting Deputy Secretary of Defense said so. We want to put the cap on the Indian explosive capability. And they put a cap. We want India to be a major power. You'll not be a great power if this is the kind of stuff that you have to contend with, meaning the weaknesses inside. So again, you say the deterrent. The deterrent has the physical things. Okay, you can do things with a 20 kiloton. Okay. You don't want to do it, say you have 20 kiloton, that's all we are going to have, and no nonsense about thermonuclear, this, that. Okay, fine. Then then you don't delude yourself. Then you work on and plan on the basis that you only have 20 kiloton proven tested weapons. Then you can do a whole bunch of things. Then you can do your targeting modes right. You fire in salvos. We now have, how long do we take to get our MIRV capability on stream? 20 years. Do you know why? We had, the MIRV capability designed at our, what's that laboratory in Hyderabad? Dr. Agarwal led it. Advanced Systems Laboratory, ASL, in Hyderabad. They are the systems designers for our long-range missiles and so on and so forth. So they had designed and kept it on shelf. And Dr. Agarwal asked Vajpayee, can I test it? They said, Abhinay. Now this poet, he went into poetry and all that stuff. I don't know what, at the drop of a hat, you see, he'd go into poesy, you see, and more poesy rather than poetry. Ye, wo, and whatnot, in this poetry fashion. He pulled down Dr. Agarwal, Abhinay. अरे अभिनय तो कब होगा ये कब होगा अभिनय was in 2002 today is 2005 we tested the MIRVs in 2025 20 years too late we've lost MIRV capability. How was that important? Because then we would have had actual weapons dispersion capability at 150 widely differentiated targets on one missile. With 20 kiloton, that would have been good. But for 20 years, you let your credibility down. You had no credibility. So this is how, and by the way, this is how I speak to my military audiences, and they're appalled, But I say, tell me what I'm wrong, because people don't understand if I were to talk defense literature. But you understand the basic thing because it hits home, and I make it funny, and you say, it hits home. यार क्या बोल रहा बंदा, पता नहीं, पर ये सही होगा क्योंकि बोल रहा है. No, because this is the point. I can talk to you in deterrence terms and talk of Thornton and this, that. Many of these people I dealt with. I had seminars with them from Rand, Arnold Hollick. All these people I've had sat in seminars with. I questioned them. We had interactions. This is a great time for me at UCLA. Because there's no of the, grad and professor, none of that. Once you're in a damn seminar room, you go hammer and tongs at each other. That's my thing. I respect nobody because of the post he holds. I respect nobody, but I respect someone's argument, the case he makes. Not because he's Secretary of Defense Production and he doesn't know the business end of a gun. Which is actually true. The last fellow came into Defense Ministry, Secretary of Defense or something after being health and sanitation. Now, God forbid, I don't know. Now, this is very useful to have sanitation around nuclear weapons. But I mean, what would he know about defense? And by the way, do you know the rules of business in the Indian government? Who's responsible for the security of the country? Do you know this? You don't know, do you? Yeah, the defense secretary is. Do you know that? It's not the military. The security of the country is the responsibility of the defense secretary, secretary to the government of India for defense. How much more farcical can it get? You come in from health and women's welfare into next morning you're a defense secretary and now you're in charge of the security of the country. Damn, you have to learn things very fast. And no one is such a genius that anybody learns anything in the 3 years they spend there. For the first year, as one defense secretary told me, I just have to learn the jargon. I don't understand what's being said. They don't understand. I can understand that. My profession is this. So to me, I can rattle off anything. Right? But for him who has moved from sanitation to electronics or some weird, from collectorate in Madhya Pradesh to something, I don't know what, they suddenly come into this center. How do these generalists acquire expertise? The greatest bane for the Indian country, for national security, were two people, in my estimation. Brajesh Mishra, who styled himself the National Security Advisor to Vajpayee. And of course, Vajpayee didn't have any sense about anything security. He's into poetry and romantic poetry and whatnot. So then, who's the other guy? Amram. Between these two guys, they finished off, and they're both there at the same time. Now, India couldn't have had more ill luck. One is the National Security Advisor. The other is head of the nuclear energy program. And Brajesh Mishra, when Iyengar and all went, I went with him. I went with people, to General Malik at the time. I've been pleading with generals, please write a DO letter saying, please test a weapon to our satisfaction. We are the military. We'll be firing the damn things in the SFC. It's not the scientist sitting in Trombay will be firing the damn weapons. So
I want to ask you, sir, in conclusion, what do you think India should do now? I mean, all of these crises, of course, you've written about this at length and, you tell an amazing story about this also. But in fact, things are not changing.
I don't know of them. Let's put it that way. I'm sure something is happening. What is happening, I don't know.
What are the chances that India will test again and we'll get a thermonuclear weapon?
You cannot test once. Now it has to be open-ended. When we test, we have to have 100 tests. No one stops us until we go megaton. And megaton in the tailored weapon sense that you can literally. We claim we have that also. By the way, there's nothing we don't claim we don't have. We have everything. Therefore, we don't need to test. By the way, this is actually things that are said by R. Chidambaram. Right? We have everything. We don't need to test. We know everything. And how do you know everything? Because if the 1998 test didn't work, then how do you rejig the design? Oh, we do simulation. Okay, I'll ask my son, who is 30 years old, to sit at a computer. He can do a simulation for thermonuclear weapons. He can do it. So something blows up, wow, orange flare goes up, and all the politicians are wow, bahut badhiya. Is this how it's going to happen? No, it doesn't, because it has to be physically tested. And the military has to be satisfied. They are the wielders of the weapons. When they shoot, the yield has to be that. 20 kiloton, 20 kiloton. Then you can have, okay, this is the ground zero. Okay, in this ground zero, what is the area? What will it destroy? We have to know. That's a military decision, outcome. See, if you're iffy about it, oh, we have thermonuclear. Okay, what thermonuclear? 250 kilon. Okay. Has it ever been tested? No. So we're speculating that it's going to work out. Okay. And how much then do you speculate is going to work out? Will it be 100 kiloton? You aimed for 250. Will it be 90 kiloton? Will it be 250 kiloton? Will it be 275? It overshoots the mark, which it won't, because you have the the lithium deuteride, which is a thermonuclear fuel, which is, we can only have so much blast. right? You cannot have more than the lithium nitride thermonuclear fuel that you have. It's like running a car. You can't run it on gas when you're put in petrol, you're on vapors, So the car is going to stop somewhere. Similarly, the weapon will stop at that level. If you say 250 kiloton, you can plan for it. 250 kiloton over Islamabad, what does it mean? Is there a better target? Yes, there's a better target than Islamabad, because in Islamabad, there nothing but you take out some government secretaries, who are useless anyway. It's like here. So what do? You choose your targets well. You choose your concentrated targets. Target sets are very important to decide for a military. So if they don't know the definiteness of the yield, what can they plan on by way of strategy? Forget about being a nuclear strategist. This is a simple artillery barrage. I'm saying that my ballistics are going to, are in such a way that if I fire, it's going to hit there. They know this is the table. They call it the artillery table. They know, okay, let's go and hit somewhere 40 kilometers away. But if you have no artillery table, there's no such thing in the art thing. You have to take Archidambram's word for it. And everybody else and his uncle said it doesn't work. Now Archidambram alone now is dead, so that has gone down with him all. So that's finished. So there's no one to claim anything anymore about the in Indian weapon. This is the situation where you are in, because there's nobody who can vouch for the weapon anymore. There is nobody anywhere right now in the Indian nuclear field who can vouch for a weapon. And then no one in the military is telling the government, hey, if nobody can vouch for it and we are supposed to be firing it, hey, please do something. That something is open-ended testing. So all doubt is removed from everybody's mind. From everybody's mind. Yours, mine, the militaries, people looking on, Pakistan General Staff, Chinese General Staff, there's 250, yeah, these guys are dadas, right? Or something equivalent. The Chinese are the idiots, but that's what they claim anyway. I remember K.C. Pant telling me, he was chair, 10th Finance Commission, I was the advisor, defense expenditure. He's saying, K.C. Pant said he had gone to Beijing once. He says, where do we fare in your threat assessment? They said, you don't fare anywhere. We don't look at you at all. This is K.C. Pant when he was defense minister in 1982, in Rajiv Gandhi's government. It was then the Chinese said, you don't count at all. What are we talking about? So just remain in your, beating up on Pakistan. He beats up on you. You beat on a regular punching show, you see. That's what it is, right? Every periodic punching shows, and then we make a big halla gulla about it. And then everybody goes back to being bhaichara. What did General Gul Hassan say? The last CNC Pakistan. Do you know what he said? He came here. Why? Because he was the Rimkolian from Dehradun. And he says, oh, we are like public school boys. You know what? I use it in my book, so I know. So he says, we are public school boys, and then in the boxing ring, we bloody each other's nose, and beat each other to pulp. And after that, kiss and make up. We are not kissing and making up, but short of that, we are following Gul Hassan's thing. And I went to a public school. I went to a military school at that. My friends I of course had the good sense to get out of the military in India and all that nonsense and go away, right? But my friends are all air marshals and generals and lieutenant generals and so on. And they, of course, they don't want to meet with me because, I embarrass them too much and I have absolutely no thing. But this is the thing, right? Somewhere down the line, no.
Very, very, you obviously put some of it in a jovial manner, but of course you point to a very deep crisis. Thanks very much, Professor Karnad, for taking time off to talk to me. I look forward to having more such conversations with you, and I hope one day you will come and lecture the students I teach. It's been a real pleasure talking to you, sir, and I really appreciate your time. We've learned a lot from your writings over the years, and we're very grateful that you continue to give such straightforward, honest assessment of what our security needs really are and where we are failing. Thanks very much again.